What is up, and welcome back in to the Bomber Boys. Dylan Price and Justin Chevalella to guide you through what has been a turbulent last few weeks in Yankee world. Last time Justin and I got together, the brakes were loose, they were a little squeaky. They needed some WD-40, but since then the brakes have fallen off. The car is going down a cliff at a rapid pace, and the New York Yankees need answers and they need them fast. It's a homestand with the Reds and the Red Sox on the docket this week to break it all down, to tell you what they need to fix, how they can fix it, while myself and Justin Chevalella will guide you through it. But before we start anything, Justin, first and foremost, how are you? But it's going to be a double question. Second, we laid down the gauntlet last time we were together. If you shaved your mustache, I'd shave my goatee. I'm just now finding out of the time of this recording, right at this very moment, you shaved your mustache. So apparently I'm going mustache for the next recording. But with that said, how are you and how is being clean shaven for the first time in a while?
Well, first of all, I'm doing good today. Nice little off day for the Mainers. We have two off days within the next 3 days. Do play on July 4th, and it is a long bus ride, but you'll take it when you have 2 days off to bookend a 3 day stretch. And I mean, the mustache, it almost feels like I lost some weight on the upper lip. It's not holding it down as much anymore. Feel a little naked though, a little bit young too. Um, it had been since I went back and found the day I put it on. It was or started to go with it. It was March 30th. So we're looking at what 3-4 months with it, and just felt like needed a new change of pace. You're in the second half of the season for the Mainers here. You know, trying to second half maybe being a little superstitious. Went 11-11 first half. Now can we go better than 500 here? Let's shave the mustache, see if it helps. Now I will say somebody came up to me and said, if the season goes off the rails, it's your fault for shaving the mustache. So there's a chance I have to bring it back quickly if there's a mini losing streak, which I don't foresee happening. But if there is, I'm going to have to put the mustache or start growing it back out. But definitely a weird look for me. Um, it's been a while. I feel like I lost about 20 years on my age by getting rid of it, which is probably a good thing in a sense, but it is definitely a little bit. I do miss it a little. I'm not gonna lie.
Goodness gracious. I mean, Mainers 12 and 12, right? We were talking about 500. Charlottesville Tom Sox 18 and 6 at the time of this recording. I think maybe if I shaved the goatee down to a mustache, which I guess it would look something like this, um, I mean, if they go on a losing streak, I'll have to grow it back too, but maybe they'll go on a even more of a tear. Who knows what'll happen? We'll see if the facial hair has any correlation to our summer league teams. But in the meantime, we'll see if maybe you're breaking the stretch for the Yankees. And
We're off to a bad start if that's the case.
somewhere Hal Steinbrenner is loving you right now for no stash, no facial hair, and I mean, I guess really George is loving you most of
And
all.
I will say that mustache was breaking the rule because it came down past that halfway point. So I would not have been able to play for the Yankees because of the mustache. I mean, my playing abilities alone probably say I can't play for the Yankees, but the mustache, that was just two strikes against me. So I don't think I would have been able to. How are you doing though?
All is well back in the beautiful state, our home state of New York, for a few days before resuming things back in Seaville, back home for the mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Nancy.
Happy birthday.
I assume this will be out before the birthday. But back for the fourth, it's at our halfway point as well. Just came out of our little pseudo all-star break. So a little bit of time off and then back at it again for the closeout of the season. You and I were just talking off air, but can't believe we're already halfway over the halfway mark through our summers and starting to talk about what life will be like in the fall as we'll resume Bomber Boys from the beautiful Bellastario Media Center. And hopefully by the time we are doing that, the New York Yankees are back on track. Let's talk about the Yanks. Right now, when you and I last got together, it wasn't doom or gloom by any stretch, actually, because you and I hadn't been together in quite some time. We talked about the good, the fact that the Yankees were, at that time of that recording, 27 games over 500. Since then, though, things have gotten rocky and they have gotten rocky fast. It was a tough stretch, both with the Blue Jays. I mean, even going into last night's contest against the Reds, not exactly your ideal game, but it was a Subway Series loss to the Mets. It was a series loss to the Braves, a series loss that was the last time you and I talked against the O's, and a split series with the worst team in the AL East, the Toronto Blue Jays. Now you can't even close out a potential sweep of the Reds. It's just hoping to win the series at home and then go back into what has been the kryptonite this season, AL East play against the Red Sox. Overall, obviously, a Subway Series loss, a series loss, well, two series losses, and a split series. What is the vibe check in Justin Chevalella's opinion right now on this Yankees team?
We're about at the point of panic button, especially with the trade deadline quickly approaching. It's panic button time. If you can't win these last two games against the Reds, who have had an up and down season, if you can't win this series against Cincinnati, it it's definitely panic time, and I think it should be anyway. I think it just is more so if you can't get this series against the Reds, if you can't with the Red Sox this weekend, you're into that territory of got to start making those calls. If you're Brian Cashman, pick up the phone, dial up whoever, and try to get somebody else here or a couple of new players here to freshen up the New York Yankees. They're 4-12 since we last, or 4-8 in 12 games since we last recorded 2 weeks ago today. Now, I know if you ended up being one of our viewers on that first show, it didn't get posted for a while afterwards. And other than that, though, 4-12 or 4-8, pardon me, is just not a good look. And what's been the biggest concern this time? It's the starting pitching. They have been getting lit up recently. It was 7 runs, 17, 8. Did allow just 3 in the season finale or the series finale against the Braves. Then it was 9 runs and 12 runs against the Mets. 9 runs, 5 runs, 9 runs, just 1 run against the Blue Jays. And then last night, 5 runs against the Reds. That's not how you win ball games. You have to keep your hitting into close games, especially when you've got a guy like Aaron Judge and you have Juan Soto. Talk about the lineup a little bit later and the struggles in that. But if your pitching staff isn't keeping the game close, there's no reason to even panic about the hitting because your hitting isn't shouldn't be expected to put up 7, 8, 9 runs a game to win ball games in this league, especially with how good your starting pitching was for the beginning stretch of this season. To have your ERA balloon in the way it has and to have all these guys at the same time start to struggle, the entire rotation struggling, it is a concern for the New York Yankees. That's been the problem since we last here were on air. I know the lineup has not been good either, but the biggest concern has to be the way that this starting pitching staff has been performing.
It's a starting pitching staff that, since we gotten together, has seen ERAs blossom and blossom at a high clip. Carlos Rodon's ERA is now at a 4.42. Luis Gil at 3.41. Marcus Stroman has not exactly performed necessarily poorly, but there were some antics off the field and in the dugout that have started to prompt some questions around Stroman at a 95 and two-thirds innings pitched mark. But it's about that time of the year, as a lot of Yankees fans and analysts coined it, where something usually goes wrong with Marcus Stroman in terms of the passion, the intensity that I love to see. That's almost CC Sabathia-esque, starting to become a bit of an Achilles heel to some of the teammates. Doesn't seem like it's gotten to that point. Does seem like the situation was a little overblown, but whether it's fireworks in terms of the offenses lighting up our starters or some issues off the field, nobody in this starting rotation's been safe. The re-addition, Garrett Cole, has a 6.23 ERA. He's allowed 9 runs over 13 innings pitched with a 13 hit mark and a 1.462 walks hits per innings pitched. The best starter, maybe the most reliable starter right now in terms of consistent outputs, has actually been Nestor Cortes. He currently leads the team in innings pitched on the season with 105 toss. That is far and away the best mark. Next closest is Stroman with the aforementioned 95 and two-thirds. Has not been walking a lot of batters. His whip is also the lowest among starters on the roster with a 1.105 mark. His home runs per nine is the third best mark, now that you'll include Garrett Cole, of the starters. And his strikeouts per nine is actually up from past years, 8.4 for Nestor. So a shocking development, especially because he has a 4-7 record, which is the worst among starters. It's shocking because when you and I got together before last time, we were talking about how Nestor Cortez could get kicked to the bullpen once Garrett Cole's back because Clark Schmidt, who had a 2.52 at the time of his injury, 2.52 ERA through 60 and two-thirds innings tossed, there was no room to budge anybody, and Nestor seemed like the natural guy, especially with how much money Carlos Rodon was making, and so on and so forth. But now he's the stalwart in the pitching staff. And yes, Luis Hill still paces the team in ERA and in strikeouts and has still been one of the best pitchers in baseball. And in all likelihood, despite a bad outing, should probably still earn All-Star game recognition. But with all of that said, it's a starting rotation that has seriously seen their numbers dip. Garrett Cole, despite tossing 5 frames on Sunday, which was an encouraging outing, has been a little bit concerning in his return. And everywhere else, nobody has picked up the ball, both pun intended and literally, and kind of upped their performance. I mean, I don't even know how to address performing or improving this performance because, in all honesty, you have the starters. It's just been a lack of performance.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos Rodon, I'll go back to the point on him. Since June turned around, his ERA is a 7.76. He's allowed 8 earned runs in his last start, 7 before that, 5 before that one against Boston. And it's just been, it feels like that hit and miss stuff that we saw from all the pitchers, not necessarily there right now. They are laboring through every at bat, through every inning, through every start. And you saw it, I think, best with Garrett Cole over the weekend. I was able to watch that start of Cole, and it just felt like his stuff wasn't his stuff. And I think that's just kind of summing up what the Yankees are doing right now is that's kind of been the story for everyone except maybe Nestor, except for maybe Marcus Stroman. Those two guys have, put out some good outings despite the struggles of this pitching staff lately. It's a matter of the top guys in there, in Garrett Cole, in Carlos Rodon, and in Luis Gil, who was arguably the Yankees' best pitcher in the first half of the season, or really till we came on this podcast. They are struggling right now. And Garrett Cole, I kind of understand the struggles with him. First time in game action all year, just 3 starts in now. I think he's going to be fine. He's Garrett Cole at the end of the day. He's just laboring. I think he's trying to keep caution of his elbow so he doesn't have to go back on the IL, so he doesn't potentially have to go get Tommy John surgery. I think at some point, once he knows that the strength is within his elbow and it's comfortable, I think he's going to get back to pitching freely and like he has been the last couple of years. Outside of that, Luis Gil's a guy who's in his rookie season by technicality here, and he's kind of hit that wall. There was talks about Luis Gil being the All-Star game starter at some point, and now I don't think that's even realistic option. I'm not sure if Luis Gil's even going to make the All-Star game because of his last couple of outings, and it just feels like a guy coming off of Tommy John surgery in his rookie year. It feels like a recipe for disaster. It seems like the Luis Severino, of a couple of years ago where came on hot, hit a stall point after coming back from injury still in one of his first seasons in the major leagues. And it feels like maybe Luis Gil is the option to get moved to the bullpen. I don't know if you want to because of the fact that, hey, he's made 17 starts this year. He's been pretty good. It's just the last couple that have roughed him up. But it's to the point of you have to watch the arm. You have to watch the fatigue. It feels like he's hitting a fatigue point. It's either maybe move Gil to the bullpen or maybe find a guy or a bullpen game here or there to give Gil an extra day of rest and just do that and let him get an extra day of rest into the All-Star game and into the second half of the season. It makes it a little easier when Schmidt returns, if Schmidt returns, because he was transferred to the 60 recently instead of just the regular 15-day. But if Clark Schmidt returns, then you're talking about either Gil getting that extra day of rest with a 6 starter in the mix or maybe to the bullpen. I'd prefer him to still start. I just don't see a reason or a method for him to keep starting when Schmidt returns with everyone else in the rotation because of the wall he hit. If he didn't hit this wall, I'm not saying put Gil in the bullpen, but because of the wall he's hit, it has made things interesting. And that choice that we talked about doesn't seem as unrealistic as it did when we last talked 2 weeks ago.
Luis Heel tossing 4 innings last night in the loss, and ultimately we saw a similar situation arise a year ago. Clark Schmidt was the most consistent starter outside of Garrett Cole in the Yankees' entire rotation. And a lot of the debate surrounding Schmidt, both between you and I, before the season really got into the heat of the summer and before we had our layoff last summer, and then even when we returned, was the first half of the discussion was at some point, will they put Clark Schmidt on a innings limit? And then the summer, the conversation between analysts, pundits, whatever it may be, was, hey, is Clark Schmidt going to fatigue once we get into those July months? And, he's never pitched this long into a season before. And then once we got into the fall, it was, hey, Clark Schmidt was a productive starter, but that fatigue truly got there. Now, in a full season, Clark Schmidt was expected to give a regular starter's number of innings. 60-day IL for him, as long as he comes back fully healthy, might be the beneficial thing because you're still easing him up to a full workload of a starter. He's still very young, 28 years old, and was a starting pitching prospect that is a rarity within the Yankees organization, has developed to pretty strong of his full potential, former South Carolina Gamecock. Luis Heel, on the other side of things, has been the revelation of the staff. He was a guy that you were one of few who was super high on. There was talk of, okay, Clayton Beeter and Will Warren aren't ready yet, so let's throw Heel in the rotation and see how it pans out. Well, Heel has been, as we've talked about, a potential all-star, a revelation, but he's at 89 and two-thirds innings tossed. You have to wonder, like you mentioned, both between the return from injury, but also a matter of fact of, hey, listen, he's never pitched this far into a major league season before. And he's not just been the starter and a starter in the rotation, he's been a front of the line starter in the rotation. 102 strikeouts. His marks are still amongst the best on the team and amongst the best in the American League. But at a certain point, like you said, you have to wonder where the plug may be pulled. I think if we see Heel go into the All-Star break with a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of momentum, then that would be encouraging, and we'll start to get to a point where we can go, okay, maybe the time off will be good for him. Maybe you add, like you said, a bullpen day, a sixth start in there. Somebody comes in and, maybe even if it's just an opener, maybe it's a Caleb Ferguson tosses an extra two. Luke Weaver maybe gets a start. Whatever you need to do to try to consolidate the number of innings you're giving Luis Heel. But ultimately, if this continues down the downward path, and if by the end of July we're talking about a Heel that looks nothing like his former self and those doesn't look like the king of the hill anymore, or king of the heel that he was coined, if we're talking about that, then it really becomes more realistic of when Clark's back, Heel goes to the pen. And I also think we start a conversation soon of, okay, with Cody Petit on the 15-day, if Petit's still not ready to come back, do you start starting Luke Weaver? Luke Weaver, who has been the most reliable and dependable arm in the entire bullpen, do you forego that asset who has become exactly that and say, okay, maybe Luke Weaver, who's pitched, I believe, the most number of innings of any reliever and by a wide margin over Clay Holmes is the next closest, but Weaver's 47 and two-thirds has 13 innings above Clay Holmes. Do you start turning that asset into, okay, how do we know he's going to pan out as a starter? Because clearly he has been much better as a middle reliever. There's so much chess that's going to have to be played by Aaron Boone, and the injuries obviously are making that both better and because he's not forced into any decision right now, but also, listen, having Cody Petit, having Clark Schmidt, having even go to Jonathan Loizaga, having those guys into the fold and having to make some of these tough decisions is where you want to be, and it's where you originally expected to be at this point in the year. Not at a point where Garrett Cole's back and through 3 starts hasn't looked like Garrett Cole, and at a point where Nestor Cortez, who was projected to maybe be the odd guy out of the rotation, is your most productive starter. So it's concerning. It's not great. Marcus Stroman has still been the most reliable, I'd say, start in, start out guy. But then you get into the Marcus Stroman thing, which is what I wanted to talk to you a little bit here before we get into the bullpen as we pivot out of the starting rotation. Marcus Stroman, 3.29 ERA. That's the best mark of active starters right now. His 95 and two-thirds is second best on the team. His strikeout numbers have not been nearly as high as everyone else. It's 70, but Stroman's never been a high strikeout clip guy. He's more so been at this stage in his career at 33 years old, just a guy is going to get 6 innings and be good. But the downside of Marcus Stroman, which is why you and I were not on the Stroman campaign for the addition as a starter. We were more on the Yamamoto campaign, but we somehow got from Yamamoto to the most realistic addition, which was Marcus Stroman. But the downside of Stroman that we saw as Yankees fans when he was with the Blue Jays and we've seen in past years is the attitude, the passion that is great to have. And in a Yankees team that is relatively reserved and kind of vanilla at points, he adds a little bit more flavor, a little bit more oomph to the rotation and to the pitching staff. But with that, you're kind of playing with fire. And we saw that on display a few games ago.
I personally don't have a problem with it. I think the Yankees needed that wake up call. I think Gleyber Torres himself needed it because if you look at it, now Gleyber Torres has 4 straight games with hits, and 3 of them were multi hit games. There was also a benching thrown in there. But between the passion that Marcus Stroman displayed, the benching, it has made Gleyber Torres a more productive player. And it just seems to me that the Yankees, they need that right now because right now it's a bunch of guys that I think are furious at themselves for the way they're performing, but there's been no accountability. And that's been a problem for the Yankees for years now. It's always that, you're going to be defended by your manager in the media. You're going to be um, protected by Brian Cashman as well. And I completely understand it. That's your job as a manager. That's your job as a general manager is to say that these are our players, these are our guys. We're going to go to fight with them every single day. But it's also important to have that level of accountability with guys and to see it come. And if it has to come from a guy like Marcus Stroman, I don't have a problem with what happened over the weekend. And if you're listening and don't know what happened, Marcus Stroman went in the dugout. He was pissed off at Gleyber Torres because Gleyber Torres made a throw from second base on to first that would have been a double play. It was a little bit of a soft play or a soft throw, and the runner ended up beating it. So the inning continued, and Stroman was not happy. And then Aaron Judge pulled aside Stroman, and don't know exactly what he said, but it seemed like by the lip reading experts out there on the social media that Aaron Judge said, "We don't do that around here." I don't think it's the worst thing for it to happen, though. Maybe not on that level of display, but to keep each other accountable and to get, a struggling team back going. Sure, if this was happening every night, I'd say panic, raise the red flag. Something's wrong with your team. But for it to happen while your team's in this midst of a struggling stretch and while arguably one of the most consistent pitchers between him and Nestor Cortez is out there on the mound trying to will you to another victory, I really don't have a problem with what happened over the weekend. And I think I'm not saying go do it every day. But if there's situations like that where, a guy doesn't hustle down to first base on a ball that turns out maybe it was able to get beat out, or if they make a bad throw like that, I'm not saying an error because errors happen in a long game of baseball. It's going to happen. But on those plays that are hustle plays and the extra effort, I don't have a problem with guys getting called out for their effort. I think it's needed, and I think it happens on championship teams. When players can hold players accountable, that's when a team is going to be best because it shows that they all care a lot. They're all trying to win and they're all trying their hardest and putting their full effort into it. When you have guys that are letting that go, letting what Glaber did, and to be honest, I think the runner would have beaten it even with the strong throw. So maybe not the best, situation to use as an example here. But when an inning is extended or something like that happens, I don't know if it's the worst thing to have guys be held accountable.
Here's my, I guess, 2 cents on the matter before we talk about the bullpen. I bring it up because it's scary in the sense of, is this going to be the Marcus Stroman where the brakes fall off for him? Is this where his attitude, his passion gets too much of a situation? It didn't seem like that. It does seem like Aaron Judge and some of the more tame Yankees were able to put the genie back in the bottle and not let things get too overexposed or too contentious by any stretch. But where I do agree with you and where I honestly wholeheartedly think has been one of the downfalls of this Yankees team since the CC Sabathia days, since the Mark Teixeira days, since the days where even Didi Gregorius and Ronald Torreyes were running around the dugout having fun. This is a fun team. There are guys who get along really well, and obviously we've sent memes and stuff back and forth to each other or posts. Like, this is a family of a team. They've become a unit. But on the other side of things, they are the vanilla New York Yankees. This is a New York Yankees team that you want to take your kids to these games. You're probably not hearing too much bad language. It's a PG Yankees, if
You're
you
hearing
will.
it from the fans. You're not going to be hearing it from
Well,
the
yeah.
guys on the field.
But you're here, it's a PG Yankees. You know what I want to see? I want to see them light a little fire under their you know what's. as much as Marcus Stroman, it's a dangerous game to play because when Marcus Stroman goes off the rails, Marcus Stroman could go off the rails. But I would love to see more fire out of guys. And you know who I really want to see it from? And I can't believe I'm saying these words. I get he's the captain, and I get there's a lot more other stakes and everything at risk. But dude, you have been plunked so many times this season. The other day, there was ample cause for Judge to throw the bat down, and you don't have to throw hands. In all likelihood, let's be real here, he's over 6'7". I'm not. If I'm a pitcher who's throwing at him and I'm 6'3", and I'm like, oh, okay, the best way I'm hitting you is probably with a 95-mile-per-hour fastball, not with my right hand here. I'm backing off once I see Aaron Judge get in my face. But show a little chutzpah. Get back in his face. Don't just take the plunk and walk to first base. Chew him out a little bit. As much as I didn't love Josh Donaldson's time with the Yankees, and I think you're in agreement with me on that, the one thing I loved about Josh Donaldson, he shows a little fire. He shows a little aggression. You don't just hit Josh Donaldson and expect no repercussions. In this case, you hit Aaron Judge and he just goes, yep, okay, I'm going to walk to first base. Look at Garrett Cole and Vlad Guerrero the other night. Yes, there was an apology and all worked out, but the Blue Jays, who really at this point in the season have no reason to be playing aggressively and crazy intent, other than it's a rivalry because the Blue Jays are at the bottom of the barrel of the American League right now. They're playing with a little bit more fire, though. Vlad was ready to charge Cole and throw hands, but the situation diffused itself, and they're two well-respected stars of the game. But Aaron Judge getting plunked, dude. Or somebody needs to come out of that dugout. I want to see somebody pop that step and hop out there and defend your captain. Show a little heart. Stop being the vanilla PG Yankees. Go out there and be the Mark Teixeira. Go out there and be the Brett Gardner. I want to see a roof in that dugout come down. I want to see Brett Gardner swinging through like he did then, or at least have a little bit more passion. I get these guys all love the game. I get these guys all care. But you know what? As much as it is being devil's advocate here because you don't want to see the antics where they're disagreeing with each other or fighting in house, like there seemed to be a little bit with Marcus Stroman and Torres, show some aggression at least to the other team. It's a game. It's a sport. It's meant to be fun, but it's also a battle. And these rivalries are intense. Listen, Red Sox Yankees this weekend. If somebody gets plunked, charge. Show some energy. These are the vanilla PG Yankees right now. And honestly, I don't hate what Marcus Stroman did. I'm in agreement with you because I would have liked to see some more fire out of it, at the very least, from the top down, from the captain.
Beginning of the year, you and I, while we were still at school, were talking about that kind of swagger that Stroman and Verdugo had brought to the dugout. But now you look at it and realize it's because the team was winning is why it had swagger. Things go off the trail a little bit, and now all of a sudden the swagger's gone. That heart, I mean, it's still there. Obviously, they're playing, they love the game of baseball, but the heart in terms of you don't see them popping out of the dugout on home runs. You don't see that type of stuff. And I mean, I live up here in the New England region for the summer, the second straight summer up here. And every time I bring up the Yankees, it's not that same hatred that once existed between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. Now, I'm not saying when the Yankees played at Fenway a couple of weeks ago, I would have been comfortable going in a New York Yankees jersey, but on the field, I'd be comfortable as a player. That rivalry has seemingly fizzled out because of how it's gone the last couple of years. And I agree with you. You don't need to be throwing intentionally at guys, but if you're going to get hit, why not go out there and you don't have to, again, charge them, but throw the bat down, show your frustration, show that you just want to hit the baseball and play the game of baseball and kind of fire up that dugout. I always take this back to the 2017 team that exceeded expectations. There was a fight with the Detroit Tigers of all teams that year. There was multiple bench clearing altercations with the Detroit Tigers that year. I understand that, it necessarily hasn't gotten to that level where Austin Romine's going to be going at Miguel Cabrera, or in this year's case, Austin Wells is going up against Vladimir Guerrero, I guess. I don't know. You don't need to get to that level where guys are getting thrown out and Gary Sanchez is taking extra sucker punches to the Tiger on the ground. You don't need that, but you need that fire when David Robertson's going to come chugging out of the bullpen like that from left field. You need that stuff back from this team. I think baseball itself has softened a little bit and you don't see that stuff anymore, but you can still find ways to show that passion and show that, hey, let me fire up my squad. I am not really a fan of Aaron Judge going to Marcus Stroman and saying, hey, we don't do that around here. I understand why he did it and why it's a good look as a captain. But if he could have that conversation in the dugout after the game, I want Aaron Judge to go to Gleyber Torres too and say, hey, let's pick this up. Let's go. That was out number 3 right there, and we could have been back in this dugout hitting a bit earlier. I want that stuff. I don't want it every day because that just shows a bad culture within the team. But to fire one another up, and maybe it doesn't have to be team and team, it doesn't have to be a Yankee going at a Yankee. But like you said, when Judge got hit against Toronto the other day, why not take an extra 2 steps towards that mound? Maybe the wrong guy got hit because Judge really doesn't do that stuff. Maybe if Verdugo got plunked intentionally, he'd take those extra steps. But somebody's got to do it because right now nobody's doing it. And it just, you said the vanilla Yankees, they're flat. They're kind of boring. And by kind of, I mean, they're boring. They're there to play baseball. And I get it. I get it with the money thrown in there. But you can have a little bit more fun here. And by fun, I mean, you can show frustration and fire one another up.
Let's talk some of the good because there is still a lot of good. This team still stands atop the major leagues, and we'll pivot here to some lighter hearted conversation because I think you and I are in agreement here that I mean, to all accords, the Yankees just need to light a little bit more of a fire, and maybe they'll do it
Mhm.
in these next few games, especially with a rivalry series coming up with the Red Sox heading into the All-Star break. Maybe there's a sour taste in their mouth after the Red Sox dismantled them on national television with the most stolen bases in their team's history. Maybe there is. We'll find out this weekend. But in the meantime, the bullpen, I mean, I'll just kind of quick hit it here. The bullpen has kind of gotten back on track to some extent. It hasn't been the most reliable, but there's at least good performances being stacked from guys like Jake Cousins, from guys like Tim Hill, and from guys like Josh Maciejewski, who have now found themselves on the 40 man. Listen,
Great
I'm all
pronunciation right there because I wasn't even going to attempt to say it.
Well, shout out to Josh Maciejewski. Shout out to Anthony Masevich. Got to know the guys last summer. Did 2 stories on the guys. Got to interview them. Great guys. Glad to see them up in the bigs. But they were definitely not anticipated additions to the team in the incoming of the year. But with that all said, Michael Tonkin has been one of the most reliable relievers on the staff. Caleb Ferguson is still the probably one downside of the staff, but you really can't afford to scrap another lefty here, at least until Maciejewski and Hill kind of find a rhythm. All right, enough Siri. But with that said, I overall, I mean, we can keep it pretty quick here. I do think another arm still needs to be added. I think you and I are in agreement on that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge profile move, but I do think there's still the need for another arm. Maybe once guys are healthy and they're back, guys like Nick Birdie, guys like Ron Marinaccio, Johnny Lasagna could be in the fold. Scott Efros is starting to throw and begin a rehab assignment. So maybe these are guys who could come into the fold and come into the fold soon, but I still feel like there's another reliever out there that needs to be added to the Yanks roster.
I personally still think too. I said it in the beginning of the year about this bullpen. I think it's a bunch of guys overperforming and it's being held up by Elmer's glue. And eventually that stuff, dissipates and things are going to fall apart. I mean, just those names that you said, the ones that I'm not going to try to pronounce myself, and then add on Tim Hill and add on Phil Bickford and Jake Cousins, the guys coming up to get these, fill spots in the bullpen until health comes, they're going to fall apart eventually. And we've seen it with a couple of guys, Caleb Ferguson probably being the main one after his hot start to the season. It's been that kind of rough stretch where you want to make sure that your bullpen is good to go in the later parts of the season in August, September, and hopefully October. I still think the Yankees are going to the playoffs. I don't think we have to hit that panic button just yet. But I'd say 2 arms, yes, you got a bunch of guys overperforming, but when does that stop? You've seen the rotation, a bunch of guys overperforming. That's hit a wall. When's that going to happen? Is that going to happen to the bullpen? Well, why not get ahead of it and make sure you not just add 1 arm, add 2. If you want to add 1 and then say that Scott Efros is the other addition at the deadline, sure, you can probably get away with that one too, because I like Efros before he got injured. I think it's just a matter of you've got to shore up the bullpen because right now your bullpen's getting taxed a lot more than it should be. And that's when you're going to get hurt down in September when these guys that are throwing more innings than they should be either start to get tired, they get hurt, or the opponents now have more against them because they're pitching more and they figure them out.
let's talk lineup as we round out today's episode. A lot of good for the most part in certain facets of the lineup. Still some bad that needs to be improved, but ultimately, despite a couple series losses, it's been more targeted on the starting pitching and the pitching staff, less on the lineup. I'll go through a couple of the bright spots before we get to a few of the low spots. Aaron Judge is in the race for the Triple Crown right now, batting 321, 32 homers, and 83 runs driven in. Just behind him in terms of production is Juan Soto, who's got a 300 flat average, 61 runs driven in, and 20 long balls. They've continued to be the best duo in all of baseball. Judge is heading to another All-Star game. Soto likely joining him as well. And in Soto's case, some injury issues, some tightness, some bruising, but looks to be all good, which is a nice welcome sight. Verdugo has been in a bit of a downward slump, 241 on the season, though, which is still respectable, still about what you expected from Alex Verdugo going into the campaign. Another guy who's kind of dropped off a little, Anthony Volpe, with a 257 average, but the real nice bright spot here for Anthony Volpe is a 311 on base percentage. That is also one of the best marks on the team. 440, though, and 435 for Judge and Soto, respectively. Those are the good numbers in the lineup. I would also throw Trevino's 241 with 8 homers and 26 runs driven in, and
Ben Rice.
Waldo's numbers as well. This is where I would, yes, I would also mention Ben Rice, 270, has done a pretty good job coming in thus far. The bad is still no DJ LeMahieu of old. At this point, LeMahieu looks like one of the worst hitters in baseball. His on-base percentage is lower than Judge Soto's average and even close to Ben Rice's 270 right now. That's not great. Gleyber Torres, let's hope that the upward swing in these last few games keeps up, but he's still at 226 on the season. Austin Wells has been solid. Austin Wells has been pretty good defensively compared to Trevino, but Austin Wells still has not improved the way you would like it. Now that we're at July, I think it's fair to say that. Trent Grisham has not been even close to a serviceable replacement outfielder. The guys who have impressed are the guys who have just really joined the team and are joining the team in the long run now here, and Ben Rice and Jahmai Jones. JD Davis is not really a noteworthy addition to the roster. As we come through the good, we come through the bad. I want your most impressive player of this last run right now. And unfortunately, I'm not going to accept Aaron Judge as an answer. And your least impressive in this lineup. I'll do the same following years.
Well, I mean, Aaron Judge obviously is the most impressive, but since I
I'm not
can't take
accepting it.
him, yes,
Not.
I know,
It's low hanging fruit,
I know. I'm
even though
gonna.
it's 7 foot something.
Hey, remember last time we were on here when I left Luis Heel for the pitching staff for you to have? You could have
I
left me
think I
with
jinxed
Judge.
him. I'll be honest. I think I jinxed him.
I mean, potentially. You could have left me with Judge. Now you're leaving me with Soto. I'm not going to go there, though. I really like what Ben Rice has put together through his first 13 games in the major leagues. 10 for 37 at the plate, 4 runs scored, 4 driven in, 270 average, 364 on base percentage, 351 slugging. Sure, slugging won't, it doesn't really pop off the page, but hey, you're getting at bats that are quality at bats time after time with Ben Rice. Oh, and hey, his strikeout number is also just at 6 through 37 at bats, just about a sixth of the time. I mean, that's still better than what you're getting from some of your top guys in the lineup. Even the guys hitting well have strikeout percentages, that are higher than Ben Rice's. I just like, as a young guy, one of those fresh faces. We talked about what Jason Dominguez and what Austin Wells brought to this team in August last year. Ben Rice came up at a tough time for the New York Yankees because they hit that, rough stretch in the starting pitching rotation at the same time. But he's a guy that's played himself into a role. It seemed like, it would be Ben Rice and DJ LeMahieu until Anthony Rizzo came back. Instead, it's Ben Rice. That is Ben Rice's first base. And to be honest, even when Rizzo comes back, that should still probably be Ben Rice's first base spot based off the way he has started out his major league career. I hope I'm not jinxing him here. I'm hoping that he hits his first major league home run tonight just to make it, make me seem a little bit better. But now I have to go to my negative, and probably going to surprise a lot of people. But my negative is actually Anthony Volpe. And I know you just talked about the numbers of Volpe. I get it. 257, 311 on base percentage. But it's not really Anthony Volpe's that is my concern. It's Aaron Boone not moving Anthony Volpe from the leadoff spot. Anthony Volpe is a good hitter elsewhere in the lineup, I don't believe in Anthony Volpe as a leadoff hitter for the New York Yankees or, quite frankly, any team. A leadoff hitter's got to set the tone. And 257 batting average, to me, doesn't set the tone enough. And I get it. You look around the rest of the Yankees, there's not much you could put there. It's a matter of that to me, what Volpe has done has screamed to me that you have to go find yourself an actual leadoff hitter here at the deadline and let Volpe go down to third. So actually, it's probably a blessing in disguise that his batting average has kind of gone down since moving to the leadoff spot early on in the season, mind you, when he was hitting exceptionally. And then they move him to leadoff. He struggles, got hot again, and now is kind of in that slump again. But I'd have to say Anthony Volpe to me did not take as big of a second year leap as the Yankees needed him to take.
So I wholeheartedly disagree. Anthony Volpe is actually my most impressive player, obviously, because we're not going to use Soto and Judge here, folks. I think that even with the card he's been dealt of being placed in the leadoff spot, he still continues to perform. I like the 311 on base percentage. I'm happy with the upswing. This is a guy who was barely above 200 last year. Barely. By the skin of his teeth, he got there. And he's now batting 257. To me, that is a huge sophomore swing in the upward trajectory. 28 runs driven in from the leadoff spot for the most part of his time. Pretty strong. 6 home runs. I'm not mad about it. That's a solid number for a guy who's in the
Batting 206 over his last 30 games. If we were talking about this stretch of the Yankees, though,
it's nobody's performing well. Your two best hitters are batting second and third right now.
yeah,
One
and you won't let us
Judge.
talk about them.
Well, the problem herein lies that this is the exact core of why the Yankees are struggling right now. And I do agree with you. He's not setting the tone right in the 206 in the last few games is not exactly what you want in leading things off. But let's look through the rest of the lineup here. Who else is going to answer the call? You want Glaber at 226 leading off. You want Verdugo, who honestly is probably your best cleanoff hitter right now. He should be batting cleanup. Well, he's honestly in a slump right now as well. Tonight's cleanup hitter is JD Davis, who wasn't on the team the last time you and I talked, because that's a good situation, Boone. DJ LeMahieu was 180. He was supposed to be your leadoff hitter. Jahmai Jones or Ben Rice are probably your other options for leadoff right now. And Jose Trevino, naturally, you're not going to have the catcher lead off the lineup. So there's no other answer. Unfortunately, yeah, 206 is not encouraging. Yeah, 257 is down from his near 300 he had at the start of the season. And when you and I were talking about him to leave things off, it's not great where he's at right now, but he's in a lose-lose situation. Setting the tone, getting everybody's best pitch of the game, everybody's first pitches of the game, everybody's second time through the lineup. You're the guy starting that. It's not a win-win situation for a second-year player. It's not a win-win situation for the shortstop of the New York Yankees. He has done everything in his power to try to take a step up this season, and I truly do think he's done that. And when we reflect on the season, also defensively, he has had massive strides. He's likely going to win another Gold Glove. I mean, he has been really, really good this year. He's the most reliable part of a middle infield that has been putrid. I'm sorry. It's the word has to be used. Ben Rice coming in has elevated them 10 notches. All things considered, with the hand he's been dealt, he was dealt two twos and said to play a whole hand of poker. Honestly, the only thing good about that is he had a pair. A 3 and a 4 would have probably been a much better example. I'll go with that. But he's not been dealt good cards. Let's just go with that. Clearly, you see why sometimes I'm not the best poker player in our friend group. But with all of that said, he's done the best he could in a lose-lose situation. Now, a guy who has done the worst he could in a win-win situation is DJ LeMahieu. That's my most disappointing player. We're talking about DJ LeMahieu possibly being DFA'd. I mean, that is a legitimate conversation. I mean, 180.
It's got to be.
180, 275 on base percentage. The only guy hitting worse than him outside of JD Davis, who just joined the team, is Trent Grisham. Unfortunately, you keep Trent Grisham around because Giancarlo Stanton is not healthy right now, who is the third best hitter, I think it's safe to say. Despite average, that would be Anthony Volpe's mark. I mean, there is no situation where DJ LeMahieu should be playing on the Major League roster right now. Unfortunately, guys who would replace him, Caleb Durbin, is going to be on a 60-day IL. I mean, you would necessarily give his roster spot, even though he's an infielder. The roster spot probably would have gone to Jason Dominguez, but Dominguez is also hurt. You can talk about Jorbit Vivas. I think you'd be rushing him up to the bigs, which isn't what you want to do. John Birdie, who was a more than serviceable replacement, is still on the IL. There's no answer right now. And unfortunately, I hate this lineup tonight. Anthony Volpe leads off, Soto batting second, Judge batting third. Cleanup hitter is JD Davis. Your 5-hole hitter is a guy who's still trying to get his momentum back. So let's throw him in the 5-hole. Gleyber Torres. Verdugo batting sixth. LeMahieu 7. Jones 8. And Trevino 9. The lineup just makes zero sense to me.
Where's
It's
Ben Rice?
it has
Ben Rice
zero
has been one
meaning.
of the best hitters the last couple of weeks, and he's not in the lineup. You know, last year when we would complain about punt lineups for the New York Yankees,
This is a punt lineup.
it almost seems though that the Yankees, because of what they have right now, are throwing out a punt lineup almost every day.
It's disheartening. I get that Boone's hands are tied right now and there's not a lot he can do, but he still could put Ben Rice in that lineup. You make a great.
Why is Jahmai Jones a designated hitter? He is
Yeah,
not a designated hitter. He's not. Put him in the middle infield if you're going to play him. If
I
you
I agree.
JD Davis would be a better DH, and I disagree with JD Davis even being on this major league roster, quite honestly. He's bounced around to what, a bunch of different teams over the last couple of years, and now you have him in the cleanup spot of the New York Yankees. That's uh,
That's a
that's
slap.
disappointing. That's not what this team is supposed to be. I'd rather Verdugo, even though he's struggling lately, be in that cleanup spot above JD Davis. I'd rather you take a shot with that than have JD there right now. I don't think that's a good move. I don't think Jahmai Jones should be a designated hitter. If you want to put him in the infield instead of DJ LeMahieu, go ahead. I don't have a problem with Jahmai Jones getting at bats, but at DH, when you've got a guy like Ben Rice who's been hot, I get it. I think they're facing a lefty today, and the Yankees did not really want to see Ben Rice against lefties when he first came up. But at this point, hitting 270 over the stretch that he's been playing, you've got to put Ben Rice in there every day.
And Jahmai Jones, I think you don't take Jahmai Jones out of the lineup either. I think you probably at that point are pulling LeMahieu or Davis because Jahmai
Yeah.
Jones has been really solid as well too. Jahmai
Yeah.
Jones
No,
worked out a nice little utility role for himself on this team.
he's
Also,
just
let's go
not a
on another thing.
DH. That's the thing. He's not a designated hitter. If you want to DH him, or if you want to DH
JD
anyone,
Davis, yeah.
DH JD Davis, or heck, give Aaron Judge a day off his feet for once in right field. Do something like that. And
Push him in the
Davis
lineup.
Davis has played himself in outfield, I think, a couple of times this season, or has in the past. Whatever the case is, you can find other ways to put these 9 out there without having Jahmai Jones as your designated hitter.
Last point I'll make for you here is I go back to my impressive guy because he's stuck in the leadoff spot again tonight. You look at the top 12 players in terms of WAR on the team right now, healthy players, because Giancarlo Stanton obviously not healthy. Anthony Volpe is third on the team with 2.4 wins above replacement. For those of you that put any stock in that, he falls right behind Judge and Soto. Judge and Soto
I
combined over 10 games wins above replacement.
I think if we looked at the season as a whole, I'm not complaining about Anthony Volpe at all, probably putting him in the positives. But because I thought we were focused on this stretch is why I went negative with him. Because you need a leadoff hitter that can set the tone, and he hasn't over this stretch. And that's look, I know there's guys worse than him in this stretch, but when you have a guy like Volpe who you expected big things from, showed the big things early this season too, just to be dying out during this stretch is kind of that point of like, hey, you're one of those guys that, like Aaron Judge, like Juan Soto, you can't afford to put yourself in a hole. And it's a tough ask for a second year player, but it's the ask the Yankees need from him right now because they've got nobody else, like we've mentioned plenty of times here.
But that's the problem. I mean, I'm giving him kudos for being in a lose-lose situation. I think you're just adding him to the folder of everything else that's gone wrong with the team right now because who else are you putting in the leadoff spot? You're
No,
not
you
going
make a
to
great. I mean, try
you
Jemai
can't throw
Jones
that
at this point.
you
If you're
can't
going to DH him, why not put him at the leadoff spot?
can't throw a I mean him and Ben Rice have combined for less than 70 at bats. I mean, you can't throw these guys to the wolves either. It's just there's
There's
no
no good option.
I
No, no,
hate to say it. There's nothing that Aaron Boone can do either at this point. I do think this lineup's putrid, but the guy who needs to be listening to this podcast right now, the guy who needs to wake up is Brian Cashman. He's sitting on his hands.
Can we get into that just real quick? I know kind of coming to a close, but deadline. We talked about it last week a little bit, or 2 weeks ago. I think things have changed since then. Um, I think you probably need to we already talked about a bullpen arm. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in a starter. I would not be surprised also, and I hate it based off the way he pitched so well, but if Carlos Rodon has another bad start or two, Carlos Rodon, I believe, is out the door at the deadline. I believe it's kind of the Sonny Gray effect. You saw Sonny Gray kind of get banged up that second time around with the New York Yankees, and they traded him off at that deadline to Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken, or whatever that move was. I wouldn't be surprised if you see another bad outing or two, and obviously Rodon pitches tonight. I would not be surprised if Rodon's out the door and a new starter's in. And it really sucks to say based off the high expectations for him and how well he pitched at the beginning of this year. But I think that's from the pitching staff. From a lineup perspective, when you go to the deadline, I mean, I don't even, you've got to find an infielder. You probably should look at first baseman. You, I like Ben Rice. I think he should play every day. Is he the long term solution? I'm not sure. But an infielder to replace DJ or someone in that infield, maybe a first baseman, and probably a fourth outfield option.
And I'm kind of surfing through names here because this is where you and I got to our hole and ended up closing out the other day. Because who who do you get? And that's obviously not our job to figure out. It's our job to throw names in a hat and try to pick out who Brian Cashman will get. And 90% of the time, he doesn't even target those guys. The guy that I think we both agreed we love was Ryan McMahon last week. I mean, the unfortunate thing too is what other infielders would you want? Corner infielders even as well. Vladdy has been thrown around. I don't see him wanting to be a New York Yankee, but there's rumors he'd be okay with it.
He came
So
out the other day and said he'd be okay with it now.
I mean, maybe it's what the Yankees do. I mean, I wouldn't be entirely opposed to it, but the other conversation then becomes the payroll because in all likelihood, you are re-upping Juan Soto if you can, if he wants to come back. And I mean, I would love to then re-up Vladdy if Vladdy became a Yankee. But I mean, he's batting 298 right now, 13 homers, 50 ribbies. He'd immediately become the third best hitter on a team. And I don't have any issue with then playing Ben Rice on off days, then maybe even going out and getting a Ryan McMahon still. But I don't think Vladdy solves the problem of leadoff hitter. I think that's where Ryan McMahon obviously becomes the perfect kind of fit because he's a contact guy, a guy who can come in and make an immediate impact. Luis Robert has been thrown around. Jazz Chisholm, but you don't really need another outfielder. I don't want an
I
outfielder.
think I think you need a bench outfielder more than anything. I don't think you need a starting outfielder.
Not with Dominguez in the fold in the long term and
But
Verdugo
Dominguez is out.
back next year.
Dominguez, well, I'm just saying the rest of the year because Dominguez, it doesn't seem like,
No,
what
I'm
was it,
agreeing
four
with
to
you.
8 weeks?
You don't add another star outfielder because
Yeah.
you have your answer in the outfield. The outfield's fine. Verdugo, Soto, Judge, technically Stanton, even though we've never seen him shag a fly ball since the Stone Ages at this point. I really do think that we just don't touch the outfield. And in the long term, you have enough of a headache there with trying to figure out if you bring Verdugo back, if you bring Soto back, then how do you fit Dominguez in? That was my point on that. I think we're in a complete agreement. You've got to get an infielder, maybe
Yeah.
two. And maybe you swing big with Vladdy, and then your quiet move, even though that's still a good move, is McMahon.
You get both of them, you're looking at a Yankee team that there's no reason not to have championship 28.
I mean, it's just like a point of the year where there is no right answer right now with what you currently have. So you need to be calling the phones, playing the system, and trying to figure out what you can do here. And unfortunately, I love the farm system right now, and as do you. I think the Yankees farm system is one of the most underrated in baseball right now. But it might be time to deplete some of those assets. It might be time to go, for lack of better word, balls for the walls here because the chase for 28 right now looks like a jog. And I get it's a marathon. I get it's a long season, but the Yankees are I mean, let's go. We'll round out at that point. They're the vanilla Yankees. They're the Yankees that are content with, oh no, you pass us by right now. It's early. It's early. We'll catch you guys at some point. You know what? You go grab that water. You go get that extra mile in. We'll get you. We'll get you back in about like 10, 15 minutes. They're just not showing any energy, any enthusiasm, and it starts yes with the captain, but it starts even higher. Brian Cashman's big move right now. Let's bring in JD Davis. He's batting 111. He's tonight's cleanup hitter.
You went out and got Soto this offseason, not to sit around and see the same end that you saw last year and the years before in which you lost in the playoffs prior to the World Series. You went out to go get Soto to get to the World Series, to win the World Series, not just get there. But right now, the rest of the team is not a team that's World Series worthy. And that is a panic issue that needs to be addressed. And you don't have to wait for the deadline to roll around here in a couple of weeks. You can start making moves now, and it probably is a lot easier because if you're picking up the phones, calling Colorado right now for McMahon or calling up Toronto for Vladdy, there's not as many guys or as many other GMs right now calling up other teams because a lot of teams wait for another week or two before they start picking up the phones. Why not get on the phone today? Why not make a big splash, a big firework on July 4th and go get one of them? Why not do it now? It's just going to help you out and win you a couple more ball games that can really help down the stretch.
Good final point, I think, to close on here. I think despite us having some trivial conversation about the state of this lineup and some disagreements about the current roster, I think there's one thing that Justin Chevrolet and I are in agreement on right now. Brian Cashman, I mean, I'll give you my phone. I'll drive you out to the Bronx, whatever you need. I'll give you my minutes, whatever your issue is on your phone plan. Call somebody. I mean, pick up the Blue Jays. You just saw them. Call the Reds. Call somebody who's at the bottom of this major league right now and make a move, because right now the Yankees, tonight's fireworks night, and you're gonna have to watch JD Davis be the cleanup hitter, folks.
Watch him
Because
prove watch him prove us wrong tonight and hit 3 home runs,
I
including
was
2
just gonna
grand
say
slams or something like that.
JD Davis is gonna go off tonight as the Yankees win like 30-4 because of what you and I said tonight.
No,
So
no, no, 30-0 because we talked a little bit bad about the rotation, so it's gonna be a shutout effort, maybe even a perfect game from Carlos Rodon.
Yanks are at home up until this coming Monday. It's the Reds for 2 more games, then the Red Sox this weekend. There's Seinfeld night on the docket, another Sunday night baseball game for the Yankees to either get their get back or be embarrassed in. We'll find out in due time. Then it's a trip to the Trop and to Baltimore before the All-Star break. Justin, I hope that you and I will get together again next week. If we don't, well, we'll get together at some point during the All-Star break to give the State of the Union ahead of more competitive AL East play and another iteration in the Subway Series. Any closing thoughts here before we sign off and tee it up to the end of the homestand and the end of the, I guess, technically first half of the season?
Pay Juan Soto now, don't wait.
We could do a whole nother episode about that. But in the meantime, till we get together again, like and subscribe on YouTube, where you're hopefully watching this right now and seeing Justin Chevalello's clean shaven face. Maybe tune in next week for a mustache from myself. And, wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to it, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like us on there as well. And in the meantime, we will get together again next time, wherever you are, wherever you may be. Thanks for hanging with Justin Chevalella and myself on this iteration of Bomber Boys.